Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I was Dick Thacher. My name is Ebby, and I'm an alcoholic. I just had to start this off. Dick asked me over here. I was very glad to come because I wanted to meet some of you Memphis people. When I had an idea, I was one of 2 or 3 speakers, and I didn't know I was going to hold this thing down for 40 or 45 minutes. And back home in Dallas, I'm known as the world's shortest speaker. They used me back there around the different clubs for the 10-minute and 15-minute spots. So I don't know just how I'm going to go about holding down for 45 minutes, but I'll do the best I can. As I say, I've been living in Texas for 5 years now. Maybe I've gotten enough of that Texas braggadocio somewhere in my system. Maybe I've absorbed some of it so I can pull some of that out of the hat. There's a story I heard a year or 2 after I got in Dallas that always tickled my fancy. I hope you'll indulge me and let me tell it. As a Texas rancher drove over to his nearest neighbor, it was about 15 miles, and said, "What do you say we go to town and make a day of it?" The guy said, "All right." Got his hat, and they got in the car, and they started out. As soon as they got out of sight of the ranch house, they opened up the fifth of bourbon, had a good long pull on the bottle, and the first guy said, "You know, so we shipped 2,000 bulls from Fort Worth the day before yesterday." Nothing was said. They drove on a while, and they came to a gate, and they had to open that. And they had another pull at the bottle, and the second guy said, "You know, I shipped 2,500 bulls from my sighting 4 or 5 days ago." So they drove along, and just before they got to the main state highway, they stopped for a third good hooker, and the first rancher said again, "You know, I think we're the 2 biggest bull shippers in Texas." And I hope I have a crowd of that so I could throw it out tonight. I know that Dick and Jim Drake and some of the other boys wanted me to tell you some of the beginnings of AA as I experienced them. And you know, I think that I appreciate the things that Dick has said and other people have said about me. But I sometimes think that my chief claim to fame is that I'm Exhibit A in the antique division of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's about it. Well, I got to go back to some of my beginnings. I started drinking when I was in school. I come from Albany in New York, as my native town. I went to a private school there, and I started drinking last year. I seemed to hold it under control pretty well. And I did get off on a wild party one night. It was a military school, and we had a competitive drill, and after the drill, we all went out, and that is some of us went out and got drunk. And we got in a mess, and the principal of the school heard about it. But nothing was said. But I wasn't very well that spring, and they took me out of school before school was over, and that summer the principal wrote to my father, and he always called me Ed. He didn't call me Ebby or Eb. He said, "I don't think we can do anything more for Ed," which meant that he was just expelling me from the school. So that fall, my father says, "You're going to work in the foundry." My father happened to be in the iron foundry business. So I went to work that fall. And I confined my drinking to Saturday nights. Naturally, I had to get up 6 o'clock to get down. I worked as a motor's helper, which is fairly rugged work, as you may know. And I did that for a year, and I confined most of my drinking to Saturday nights, except around Christmas time when all the dances were going on. And then I really stepped out. I remember I tried to go to work with the drinking and the dancing and getting down to work at 7 o'clock in the morning when I was young, and you take it off and work it off by night. And I managed to get away with it for a while. But as I look back and remember those times, I wasn't a very successful drinker from the start. There were times, too, when I'd take some of the older guys around Albany home, and other times I'd be climbing the chandelier after 3 or 4 drinks. I never knew what was going to happen. The fact of the matter is, when I was about 15 years old, I remember putting a lot of thought into this business of drinking because it was in my family. My brothers drank pretty heavily, and my father did. And I kind of figured that if they drank that way and it wasn't any good for them, and it was no good for me either, because I was just about the same temperament as they were. But it was that first drink that I ever took on my own when I walked into the bar of the Hotel tonight in Albany and ordered a glass of beer all by myself, and I was a big shot. And I still say that was the very best glass of beer I ever tasted. Sometimes I can almost taste it again. And somehow that just gave me just a faint glow, and of course beer was a lot stronger in those days, and it was real beer. That was about 1914, I think. Yes, it was 1914. And I know that I said to myself, this is for me. And soon after that, when I started drinking, I kept it down pretty well at 2 or 3 drinks. I used to go out of an evening that spring, and this friend of mine, I went to school with, he called me up and asked me if I had my lessons done. I said, sure. He said, just a stall, because the family was sitting in the room. And I said, sure, Andy, I'll go out and have a chocolate milk with you. I've got time. And we were far from chocolate milk. But I managed to get home by 11 o'clock, so nobody knew anything about it. But I know that the effect and the taste of alcohol was fascinating to me from the beginning. And later on, I read a book called The Common Sense of Drinking, from which a lot of AA was taken, by Dick Peabody. He's not dead, but he was one of the first of the lay therapists that had a tremendous following of alcoholics. A lot of other books have been written by a lot of his pupils. The Glass Crutch is one of them by Dutch Chambers, and I can name a half a dozen. I can't think of them right now. But he said in that book that the difference between an alcoholic and a heavy drinker is that the heavy drinker might drink just as much on a given night as the alcoholic, but the next day was another day for him, and he went to work, and his first thing in the awakening in the morning was the office. Well, the first thought that the alcoholic had was of the night before, and where could he get the next drink to bring that party back again? And that always appealed to me because that's the way I was. I'd forget business and want to get somewhere where I could get with the gang again. And he said the effect of alcohol on people of your type is too fascinating. You can't handle it. But I knew then that, and coupled with the drinking in my family, I figured out that I should stay away from it, but I never did once I had that drink. Well, as time went on, I, of course, got into a lot more trouble. And the family business broke up. It was one of those things do that's been running since 1852, and it broke up in 1922. And I was more or less on the loose and going from one job to another and getting in more trouble all the time. My drinking was increasing. I didn't get overseas in World War I when I was in the outfit that was stationed around right in my hometown of Albany. And in the State Armory there, I got to be a second lieutenant in this outfit, and we always had a jug in the officers' quarters because there was a druggist in one of the corners right near the armory. And I always somehow managed to get a barrel of whiskey, and we could get it because those were the days of prescription. Doctor would issue you a prescription during Prohibition, and you'd go in and get this pint of whiskey, but we got it all we wanted. We got that gallon jug filled repeatedly. And there was a pretty two-fisted drinking crowd, and they were all older than I was. And finally, we got into a jam one night. We got in a taxi wreck, and I just got superficial cuts on my both wrists and face. But I was kind of a bloody mess. It was just bleeding a lot. My father came in. I was sitting on the bed, and he says, "You get out of that National Guard tomorrow morning, and say you leave my house." Well, I didn't feel like leaving this house right now, so late that afternoon I walked up and told the captain I was going to resign, request to be put on the reserve. So that ended my National Guard career in that phase of the drinking. Well, things got worse, and my father and mother died in 27, my father in 29. And I was sticking around then pretty bad. I inherited some money from my father. I should have had sense enough to take care of it, but I didn't. I lost half of it overnight in the stock market crash, and the rest I just went down the drain over a period of a year and a half. And we used to summer in Vermont, and it was there that I met Bill Wilson, but it was longer ago than 24 years ago. I first knew Bill about 1910. I went to school with him in 1912, which has taken us back quite a few years. And to get back, we went to Summers in Manchester, Vermont. Well, after my father died, the house was vacant up there. We bought a house after all the years that Father had spent money at the hotel for all of us. He bought a house in 1923, and in 1929 he died, and the house is empty. All my other brothers are married. Father died without a will, so they just divided up the furnishing and left some for me, and I had one room furnished in that house, and the rest was bare. And I was living there, all alone, drinking heavily all the time. Got away, and then we jumped now. We're going to get up to the summer of 1934, which is 24 years ago. And I'd been in the toils of the law twice that summer. I'd gotten arrested for being drunk and disorderly, fined $5 or something like that. And it seems that in Vermont at that time, I don't know whether the law is still on the statute books or not, but if you got arrested 3 times in any one given year for drunkenness, it meant 6 months in Windsor State Prison. Well, I was getting drunk right along. One time I got drunk, and I still don't know exactly how it happened, but I was in my own house, and finally somebody got out a wire for me. I fail to see yet what I was doing, because I was on my own property. But one of the boys, the boy that was constable at the time, was a guy that I'd gone to school with in 1912, the same year that I went to school with Bill Wilson. I forgot to say that I went to a private school in Albany, but this one year I went up there in Vermont in 1912, in the fall of 1912, to go to that school for 1 year and then back to my other. And this other boy is John Jackson, who was constable. And I walked uptown the next day, and I went up to sit on the store, the steps of the hardware store, to talk to the owner of it. Just then John drove up and said, "Sorry," he says, "everybody, I got a warrant for you. Got to take you down to Bennington," which is the county seat. He took me down and saw the judge. And judge says, "Be back Monday. We'll see what we can do about you." Well, I've gotten ahead of my story, because before that, I'd say late in July or the first part of August, 2 men came to see me, 2 fellows that I had drunk with often. And one of them happened to be the son of this judge. His name is Seaver Graves, and he's now living in Paris, France. And the other one was Shep Cornell, and I don't know just where he is. I think he's somewhere in Ohio. And I had a hangover, of course, and these 2 guys wandered around. I was out in back somewhere, in the kitchen, I guess. I remember they came up the back steps, and they started. They didn't know exactly how to begin on me, because they remembered me and having a lot of fun with me drinking. And I thought I had something on their mind, so I said, "Well, what do you got on your mind? What's cooking?" And they said, "Well, we kind of come to see you and see if we can get some idea in your head about some things." And I said, "You mean about my drinking?" They said, "Yeah, you're not getting anywhere. I understand you're in wrong all over town." And we got mixed up with a group called the Oxford Group. And we think that you could get help if you join up with it. And they said, "You ever think of letting God run your life instead of Ebby Thacher trying to run it all the time?" And they really talked sense the way I figured it, and it seemed to me that they were just telling me things that I had been taught in my childhood about the right way of living. And I said, "Well, gee, if these 2 guys have got something out of this, maybe there's hope for me," because I'd just about given up hope. And I tell you, I was willing to quit drinking, but I didn't know how. excuse me, I didn't know how to do it. So I listened to them, and they left me a book by one of these men in the Oxford group. I don't recall the name of that book now. But in it, I could see myself staring out of those pages. Now, the Oxford group, let me explain, was not concentrated on alcoholism. It was a spiritual group that was founded by a minister from Pennsylvania named Frank Buchman, B-U-C-H-M-A-N. It got its name Oxford Group because Buchman got a lot of people interested, and they in turn went abroad, and they went to England and Oxford University, and they got a lot of people interested over there. And from there, they went to South Africa. And they got up quite a big meeting down there. I don't know if it was Cape Town or one of those cities. And the reporters referred to them as the group from Oxford, and that damn name stuck, and it had no more to do with the group or its foundings than anything in the world. But just like those things happen, that's the name that stuck with it. And it was called the Oxford Group. And they were really trying to find something. It was that time in 1929 when the crash had come in Wall Street and the nation was kind of a low point economically. A lot of people were hopping out of windows in New York, and that's no joke because they were. A lot of them hit those manholes head on from the 30th floor. And a lot of people were drinking terribly, and they wanted to find something in this Oxford Group. A lot of people came around to it, and of course a good many of them happened to be alcoholics. And don't ever let yourself think that nobody but an alcoholic can help an alcoholic, because there were a lot of men in this group that were very understanding and had a damn good knowledge of the thinkings of an alcoholic's mind. And I sometimes think that our minds are no different than anybody else in this world. We just give in to things that other people do not. Well, anyway, that idea appealed to me. I read the book, and I sobered up for a few days, and I had started to paint the house, but I had a ladder that was too short, and I couldn't get up to all these places. And I made a deal with a boss painter, and he sent around one of his men with some equipment, and the two of us finished the house. I didn't touch a drop all that time, but the minute that job was over, sure, I went right back to the bottle because I had nothing more to interest me. It was a letdown. And it was then, on that binge after the painting of the house, that I was picked up and taken to this county judge. There's one thing that sticks in my mind, and it always will, and I knew it would at that time. It may not mean anything to you, you may not get what I mean by it, but as we drove home that afternoon, this constable, John Jackson, left me off at the house that I was living in, and he said, well, I'll be around to get you Monday. This was Friday. And he said, remember the judge says be sober? I said, yep, I'll be sober. So I went in the house, and I remembered that down cellar I had about a half a dozen bottles of ale, and I know that they're going to be nice and cool. And there's one thing I like in this world, it's Valentine's ale, and that was it. So I went down cellar, and I said to myself, I can't possibly get drunk between now and Monday on 6 bottles of ale, and I know that nobody in town is going to sell me anymore if they've heard that you know what a small Vermont community is. Everybody from 10 miles up and down the valley knows all about anything like that. And I knew that none of any of the bootleggers wouldn't sell me any. And I got down and I reached one of those bottles and that ain't cricket. It's all right, the judge said you get there sober. Well, you'll be there sober. No, that's cheating. That's somehow. And I walked back upstairs, and that damn devil got on my shoulder again. Oh, go on down there and take it. I couldn't take that damn ale. I said, no, that's not the spirit of the thing. It might be, technically, I might be all right. I'd get there sober, that's technically, but that's not exactly what he meant. He didn't say don't take a drink, but that's exactly what he meant. So I took them and put them in a basket and carried them over to my next-door neighbor, and I said, here, they're yours. And that minute, I had a victory. I know that. I had something that was just like a weight being lifted from my shoulders. And I've often thought about it. In later years, when I started drinking again, why I couldn't recapture that feeling that I had then. But perhaps that's it. It's the pink cloud, and later on you get a more mature, if I may use the word, outlook, but I don't think if you have a slip, you can ever go back again. Well, as it turned out, I went down there Monday, and there had been a third man come to see me, too. His name was Roland Hazard. And he was a pretty swell gent, too. I never knew him. I never met him before. These other two guys I had. And he was there Monday when I was brought before the judge. The judge started to give me a little lecture, and he says, Hazard, will you take this man? And he said, sure. So I was released in my own recognizance, and the charges were dropped. And this guy took me, and he took me back home and left me there. And then a few days later, I closed the house up, went down and stayed with him. He lived about 15 miles below, south of the town. And then we went on down to New York. And I stayed with Chet Cornell, one of these other chaps that had come to see me. I stayed there about a month, I guess. And during that time, we made trips back to Vermont, Hazard and I, and 2 weeks after I was connected with this Thatcher group, by which there's a much looser membership than Alcoholics Anonymous, I really think, they got me out speaking. The first weekend that I went out speaking, we went up through Vermont. I spoke in a junior college, 2 churches, a town meeting hall, and someplace else, all in 2 nights. 2 afternoons and 2 nights. And I still don't know what I talked about. But I just felt good about the whole thing and really figured that these guys must have something, that there must be a higher power, because they were the ones that originated the phrase, believe in a higher God or a higher power as you understand him. And it was while I was doing this and going back to New York, I heard about Bill. I haven't seen Bill, I don't believe, for over a year, although Bill, you see, was born and raised in a town 6 miles north of this town of Manchester, Vermont, where I used to summer. Also spent quite a few winters there. And I heard that Bill was in pretty tough shape, drinking bad, and I had been downtown in Wall Street and seen some of my old friends, one of whom married Bill's sister-in-law, and he said he was in tough shape, and he said, why don't you give him a ring on the telephone? And I said, well, I will, but I want to think this thing out a little. I get myself a pretty good story, a pretty good pitch to give to him. And I can truthfully say now that I believe that that I went over there, that Bill would either go for it, lock, stock, and barrel, or he would have none of it. He wouldn't just play around with it for a little while. I thought that if he put his teeth into it once, he'd stick to it. Which I thought I knew him pretty well, having gone to school with him and seen him over the years. So I called him up one night. I didn't get Bill, but I got Lois, his wife, and told her what had happened to me, that this must have kind of shown me something. Well, I'd only been sober myself then about possibly 6 or 7 weeks. But I think sometimes the initial effect that we get from a thing is we're more powerful then than we are later on. We get stale. Well, anyway, Lois said, why don't you come over to dinner some night? And then she mentioned the date. I said, fine. So that night I went over about 5:30, I guess, in the evening. And I rang the bell at 182 Clinton Street. The only person home was an old colored man named Green, who I've known for years. He'd been with the family. And Lois's family, that is. And he said they're both out. Both Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Wilson are out. Come on in. So pretty soon Bill appeared, and he'd been drinking, but he wasn't too bad. And said hello, and this, that, and the other thing, and he's kind of edging around. Then he made an excuse. He had to go out and get some ice cream, something else for supper, and of course I know what he was going after. I understand it. I've done it so many times myself. So then Lois came in, and there was another girl invited. There was a girl invited because she lived upstairs and had made the place into some apartments. So we all sat down at dinner, and Bill's got a little garbled in the book about the gin across the kitchen table, but it don't make any difference. The idea is there. Now, we got dinner, and then we all moved upstairs, and Lois said, well, let's hear about yourself. So I started in. I guess they got me wound up, and I guess I talked to put me at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember Bill said I walked the subway with her, and I knew that he wasn't going to go for a drink, or if he had a bottle in the house anyway. And on the way over, he put his arms around my shoulder just before I went on the subway. He said, I don't know what you got, kid, but you got something, and I want to get it. Well, he didn't stop drinking right away any more than I had stopped drinking. Back there that summer when the Oxford Group boys came to see me, but the idea was in there, and the idea happened to get in Bill's head. And at that time, I had moved to a mission on First Avenue and 23rd Street in New York City. It was run by Calvary Episcopal Church and called Calvary Mission. It was run under the auspices of this Oxford group. It was just a typical so-called Bowery mission. We had 12 men who were running it, and excuse me. We only had available beds for about 35 men, and they were full every night. So I was living there, and about 2 nights after I'd been over to see Bill, he appeared at the mission just as the meeting was about to start. He had a guy in tow, and they were both visibly drunk, but not too bad. And along about a great many of those meetings there were what's called testimonial meetings. We had a man up on the platform, and he would call on various men in the audience. They'd get up, say what they'd found. Of course, most of them were doing it just to get a place to sleep. They call it taking a nosedive for God to get a flop. That's the way they expressed it. Well, in the midst of all these proceedings, Bill gets up and walks up to the platform, and he's about 6'3", you know, and he leans his elbow on the piano, and he starts to shout. And the superintendent said, get him down, that's your friend, pull him down out of there. I said, let him go, let's hear what you got to say. The guy gave me a dirty look, but he let Bill talk. And then 2 or 3 days later, this was sometime late in November, as I've been talking to Jim and Dick and some of the other boys, I wish that either Bill or I or somebody kept a diary back there so that we could remember dates and have some continuity to our stories, because you go back 24 years and you cannot for the life you recall things accurately. Well, this was sometime late in November in 1934. And it's a few days later that Bill got himself a taxi cab and 2 or 3 bottles of beer and went up to Towns Hospital in Central Park West. And when I heard he was up there, I guess it was the next day, I went up to see him. Because I made up my mind that having started this with Bill, it was up to me to stick it out, which I think is a true thing in every AA 12-step case you go on. If you're going to do it, don't spread yourself too thin and take on 25 or 30 people. I'd rather see you concentrate on 1 or 2. I don't know whether I'm my brother's keeper or not, but I do think that if you start and put something in a man's mind and possibly in his heart and soul, you got to stick with him through his tough spots as well as his victories, because you're the one who started it, and it's up to you to see that he gets on his feet. So I followed Bill up there, and we had some talks, and he got out, and he went back down around Wall Street and began to make a few little moves in there, and I kept riding herd on him, as they say out in Texas, but I rode herd on him. And he came around, and he began to attend Oxford Group meetings, which, I might add, are exactly the same as AA meetings today. They had a leader. That's what they call it. They didn't call it chairman. They called it a leader and 3 or 4 speakers. And Bill spoke many times from Calvary House in Gramercy Park North in New York City. And later on, when we split from the Oxford Group and became Alcoholics Anonymous, we went back to that place and had our meetings there up to about 2 years ago. The original Manhattan Group. Now, of course, Ohio, Cleveland, and one of the other cities claim that they are the original AA, but I don't know. I kind of dispute that a little bit. Because there was a clear succession right through from the Oxford Group meetings until the time we broke off, and the meetings went to Ed and Bill's house, and then they went to Steinway Hall on 57th Street, And from there to Bert Taylor's shop on Fifth Avenue. We occupied one of the floors of his tailor shop. And then there's a direct succession, but I don't care whether Cleveland or anybody else claims the first group. It makes little difference. The thing gets started. So Bill and I were together a great deal that first winter, and then I went back to Albany in 1936. And Bill went on to found AA, and he's really the one. I just had something to do with giving him the idea. He went on to, with Dr. Bob, found AA, and in 1937 I had a slip. I fell off the wagon after 2 years and 7 months, which is slightly different from that DuPont film. The DuPont film had me falling off a month after I talked to Bill, but that wasn't so. I was 2 years and 6 months later. And I've had a good deal of trouble off and on. If I want to go back and count the years, I can count possibly 15 years of complete sobriety out of the 24, maybe 16 years. But they're the longest was 16 months and 8 months and 7 months and so on. And summer of 1953, I was again in New York City drinking. And I walked into the intergroup one day, and Hazel Rice, one of the secretaries there, said, "I think I've got a man that can help you who's got something real and something tangible." And she said, "I'm going to call him right away." And she called this man. He came down to see me. He says, "Where do you drink?" And I said, "Right around on 3rd Avenue." He said, "Come on, let's go." And he said, "I ran into Steve Graves, a man who originally came to see you over in Paris, France." And he said, "How's old Ebby doing?" This guy said, "I don't know Ebby, but I hear he's not doing at all." So he says, "Steve told me that you didn't have a chance here in New York, and we don't think you have." I said, "I know damn well I haven't been licked. I can't throw it off." Well, he said, "How about going to Texas?" Well, I said, "I don't know about that." Well, he expounded on the virtues of Texas and the good old American ways of living that were still down in these parts of the country. He gave me $5 and bought me another drink and said, "I'll see you tomorrow night." So he did and repeated the performance. And, of course, I worked him for another $5, that's for sure, and a few more drinks. And that was Thursday night. I said, "I'm not going to see you anymore, but the office still holds good." Saturday morning, I walked over to his apartment building, and he was outside. He was coming in one door, and I was going in the other. And I said, "Charlie, here I am. My name is Charlie Moulton." And I said, "Here I am." Well, he says, "You ready to go to Texas?" "I don't know about Texas," I said, "but I'm ready to quit drinking. I haven't had a drink since last night." So he picked me up in his apartment and got me some clean clothes and a shower, which I badly needed. That night he called up Ole Lancaster in Dallas and said, "How about taking this guy down here?" "All right," he said, "send the Yankee son of a bitch down." I could hear Ole booming it out. So the next, he got a reservation that night, American Airlines, for Sunday evening, and it was the Sunday before Labor Day, September 6th. And the dirty so-and-so never even gave me a drink. After 3 months drunk, I got on board that plane, and I didn't know whether I was on a plane or a ferry boat or where I was. And I got off the plane. It was a non-stop, and I would have been offshore in Harrison. None of stop anyway. I got off that plane, and it was the first person out of it. They no sooner had that thing rolled up, and I was down on the steps. I had enough flying for one night. When I got down there and I looked around, I saw 2 big guys, and of course I was having hallucinations all over the place. And I said, they're either a couple of G-men or they're a couple of goons from some gangster squad. And then I heard that booming voice again, "There's the Yankee bastard. There he is. I've seen him in New York." So they got a hold of me and they put me in a car and took me down to Texas Clinic. And I stayed there. I guess I stayed there altogether about 2 or 3 months. But the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was pretty rugged because I'm going to tell you right now, I had hallucinations all over the place. I didn't believe I was in Texas. I didn't dare go out of the place. One of the girls there that was taking care of the books and sort of running things took me downtown one day, and I couldn't get back in that place fast enough. I was scared of the car, the traffic, I was scared of everything. And it wasn't when I was there 2 weeks later, the guy said, I'm going out to mail some letters to the airport. Do you want to go out? And I said, I sure do. I want to see this airport and see if I'm really in Dallas. And I got out there, and I got out of the car, and I walked up to this placard that said, Love Field, Dallas, Texas. And I put my hand on it, and I said, all right, I'm in Dallas. I believe it. I swear that I stand here, I did not believe I was in Dallas. Because it's been a pretty rugged drunk and a pretty hot summer, and I hadn't had much to eat in those 3 months. And I was drinking everything I could lay my hands on, and then to be cut short like that. Furthermore, they gave me a few goofballs down there, and I hate those things anyway. I hate the effect of them. They just make me... Well, I'm sorry that I've taken up so much time telling you it's all been of myself, but I didn't know how to bring the history of AA in. You've all seen how it spread, how it's worked. I know that if it hadn't been for AA when I got to Texas, I never would have been able to survive. Just coming out here alone, I'd have been lost. It was tough enough as it was because I was among strange people, slightly different ways than ours. It was an upheaval to get from the Bowery down here in 6 hours and change yourself all around. But if it hadn't been for those good Texas people and the people in the suburban club, if I hadn't been able to go around there and stay there and shake after 2 weeks before I went in the club, a little over 2 weeks, I walked by it one day and started up the steps, lost my nerve, and went back to the clinic. Almost like a guy going back and hiding under the bed. And I know that several times they said, well, I heard him talking. I don't know what we're going to do with this guy. He's going goofy. And then I heard a colored girl that worked there. She's quite an old girl, woman, and she said, don't you worry about that man. You just leave him alone, and he's coming out of it. He's sick. And that's just what I was. I was sick, mentally and physically. And then gradually I worked out of it. Nature took over. And then I was able to get around the club and get into the activities. And maybe I got into it too fast. That was the hottest summer that had been on record in the Texas Weather Bureau. I went down on a ranch, and I was out working the sheep with a man, and he put me in as a shoot man, and that's kind of rugged work in a 95-degree day. And I got mixed up in an oil deal, and I sold some insurance stock, and every one of them flopped. The insurance company did, almost. And it's still struggling to get back on its feet. And I got in another deal, and that flopped. I was sober a year, and 1 month after the year was up, I flopped. And that was in October 1954. I had 13 months, and I only had a few days drinking then. And it was over a 3-week period, but I got slapped in the county jail for 10 days, and Mr. Bill Decker's Emporium. And I came out, and some friends took me in their house, and I sobered up. And I haven't had a drink since. In other words, I've had about 5 years sobriety in Texas. Out of 5 years and 1 month, I've had 5 years sobriety, total. And I know that I'm grateful to Steve Graves over there in Paris and Charlie for following it up, and for the people in Texas, and over here, all of you people who have given me another chance. I couldn't have done it by myself. It isn't under my own steam I did it. And I know that my sobriety in these 4 years, these last 4 years that I've been sober, it hasn't been my sole effort that has kept me sober, nor do I believe it has been entirely the friendship and the help of people. I think it has been the help of a higher power. And while I have lost that idea sometimes along this way of life, thank God I got it back again. Because I know that I couldn't exist without it. There are times when I don't have not like a great many people I hear talk that they say there isn't a day in their lives that they don't fight the desire to take a drink. Well, I'm telling you right now, flat out, I'd go get drunk. I couldn't be that much of a hero to fight it every day and every hour. I don't have that. But I do have periods every 3 or 4 months when it's maybe 2 or 3 days it's rugged. That's all I think about. Is taking a drink. And if I haven't got myself conditioned to the correct way of thinking and knowing that if I take that drink where I'm going to end up, and I have no doubt that this time, I know that last drink that the drunk, that liquor knocked me so badly physically and mentally too that I'd never survive another one. And I get that in my head and I keep it there in spite of the fact that I want to go out and I get sick of this being in harness every day and going to work. And I'm getting along in years, and I like to have a little rest once in a while, but I got to go and work. And I often think if I come home tonight, if I could take one good slug of whiskey or one bottle of Valentine's ale and then go eat, it'd help me a lot, and it probably would help me physically. It'd give me a lift. But I know I can't do it. So what is the use of toying with the idea? I don't quite get so much the idea that I used to, but I'd like to get drunk. Although that occurs once in a while because I think in every one of us there's another person, there's an alter ego. And that old drunk that was Ebby Thacher is still in there. He may be dormant, but he's there. He's just like a volcano. He takes the top off and he's going zoom. Only this time he'd go zoom, boom, and it'll be all over. And I haven't got anything much more to say except stick to your AA or stick to God. And I think that you'll find that if you're having any trouble, you'll find help there. I want to thank Dick, and I want to thank the other members and all you people who have entertained me, and I sure have enjoyed coming to Memphis. Thank you. While we are convincing you that there are no doers of thieves in AA, and Harold and the boys are passing the remittance baskets, I want to say again, if you happen to go out Texas way where Ebby has been and where Ebby has been the last 5 years, the AA out there is no different than the AA that you have here in Memphis, Tennessee. Because my first visit to Memphis was in 1935, when you first organized and you were getting together then. And one of the great pleasures of AA is to walk in and see men and women right in this audience here tonight, who are here and active in 35 that are here and active tonight. Everyone that comes in AA just doesn't walk in, bust themselves, and stay sober. You have a disease called alcoholism, and it's a tough one. Some people are lucky, I don't know. I don't know who I shot, whose mother-in-law or mine that I pushed downstairs that gave me the right. I can never grasp, even as today. Why should I stay sober and some other guy didn't? He's an alcoholic just like I am. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to try to answer it. But I do know this, as long as you remember yesterday, it's a great help for them all. The quicker you forgive yourself, the quicker you're going to get well. But when you forget where you found your sobriety, how you got sober, and you retire to the country club and no longer are active in AA, you are no longer taking your medicine. And if you don't take your medicine someday down the road, oh, you can point to me, as Ebby can. I can show you guys that are sober 5, 6, and 7, 8, and 10 years that never show up anymore. But for your information, they're not dead yet. I know a lot of people with different diseases that have arrested them. You can arrest your alcoholism, and maybe you can stay sober if you never come back to AA. And if you never come back to AA, I'm one that will never miss it. Because if you're ungrateful as that for what you found, I don't think, me personally, that I would need you, and I'm only speaking for myself. Because you found it, I found it. And I think today, the greatest stuff that we can have in Alcoholics Anonymous, not for you who are so lucky that are here tonight and all over the world in AA. If God in His infinite wisdom gave us the privilege of staying sober such as we are tonight, and I turn my back on the guy I left behind me, I don't deserve sobriety. That's merely my own opinion. I belong to the greatest fellowship in the world, and that fellowship is called Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything I have tonight, everything I will ever get any other night from herein, come from men and women. God bless you just like you. May I always be with you, and may someday I really be worthy of you. And all meetings all over the country, those who wish to join us, we close by saying the Our Father. Those who care to, will you join me? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.